All right, here we are. Jimi and the Wolf podcast. Are you ready?
I am ready, my friend. Podcasting it all the way up after some incredible Korean food.
Oh, yeah.
Man.
Tell me about what you thought of that.
It was amazing. She just kept bringing food and bringing food and bringing food, and I didn't even know what it was, and it was all incredible.
All these little side dishes?
And it was cheap.
Yeah, it was.
Something about eating clean, man. It's why those Asian people smoke and drink and live forever, because they eat so well.
They do. They have, well, I don't know where the Koreans fit, but I know that the Japanese have held on to the highest life expectancy rate for a long time.
Sure.
And they don't live very well. They drink a lot, they smoke a lot, more than we do.
But they eat right.
And they're not obese.
They're not obese.
Almost.
And they're happy.
They're happy. Well, I don't know about happy. That I don't know. There's a lot of stress in being in Japan.
Maybe happier than Americans.
Don't know about that. Could be, could not be. Hard to. They're very, the inscrutable Asian. They don't talk about.
Yeah, they kind of keep that.
And I can speak from some experience more than the average American, because I lived in Japan for 2 years, and then my business was exporting to Japan, and I went to Japan 4 times a year. The longest time was after soybean harvest. I went for a month at a time, and I exported soybeans. I built a business up from zero to about $5 million in sales, all exporting to Asia. 100%. Anyway.
Usually that works the other way around, doesn't it?
That they export to us?
Yeah.
Well, I guess. But they eat a lot of soy. Maybe that is part of their thing, that they clean living, clean food. Anyway, and the Koreans per capita eat 3 times the soy that the Japanese do.
Wow.
Or they did when I was exporting it. But it was almost impossible to get into that market because the government controlled it.
Sure.
The Japanese, it was free market. But in Korea, and I met with the Korean government trying to get in, because if they approved you, they would buy from you. But I don't know, maybe some palms had to be greased. I don't know.
It's all who you know, right?
But I met with them trying to get access. And maybe it's changed now. I mean, they are a recent developed country. They were... In fact, back in the day, they were a place where shoes were being made. Athletic. I mean, I was in the sneaker business, or supplying. I worked for DuPont, and so we supplied materials that were used in sneakers, high performance rubber, different things like that. And I traveled to Asia, and Korea was one of the places that Nike and Reebok and Adidas had their shoes made, because it was low wage.
Sure.
That they would not do that today, because it's a highly developed country. I mean, Samsung and Hyundai and all these great Korean companies, that it quickly moved from there. Taiwan and Korea were the 2 main places, and now they're not even made in China anymore, because China is too expensive. They're made in Indonesia, and I think Indonesia is a big place. Vietnam. Anyway. Today's subject, get it going deep. We're going serious.
We're going deep, but it's important. It needs to be talked about.
This is an article in the New York Times, March 8th, so just a few days before this, the previous Sunday. And this is Dying of Despair in America. And what they're describing, dying of despair, deaths of despair from alcohol, drugs, and suicide among white adults. This was a study specifically. When you do a study scientifically, you need to define it's not that they're racist or anything, they just were looking at this particular.
They have to find their demographic.
They have to find a specific demographic and study it. And this is a chart, and I'm going to put it on the videos, pictures of it, but it is a chart comparing deaths of despair for white Americans with a bachelor's degree and without a bachelor's degree. And the difference, I don't know if you'll see it, but this red over here, this is years. So it starts in 1992 and goes to 2016, and it goes by age. That's the horizontal, and the vertical is age from 25 to 70, and it shows deaths of despair. And the color coding is from 5 per 100,000 population to 147 per 100,000 population. And the red area is the 147, and the greenest area is the 5. And you can see that starting in, say, 2012, across all age groups from 25 all the way up to 60, since 2012, roughly 2010 maybe, the deaths of despair, there's a lot of really red zones, and especially since 2016, it gets really dark red here for the ages 30 to 35. Look at how dark red that is.
Yeah.
And you go over here to the with college graduates. This is data. This is no slant. I mean, this
It's
is
not
actual.
an opinion.
It's not an opinion. It's actual data.
There's
it's
nothing to do with political affiliation or who
Yeah.
you vote for. Any of these
Right.
are facts.
These
This
are facts.
is just data.
And here, the debt, there's almost no change. I mean, I don't see any change. It's all, now there's a few more deaths of despair as you get older for with college degree, but in the 20s to 30s, it's sky blue. Well, it's starting to get a little green here, a little lighter, but radically different charts for with a college degree. And having a college degree doesn't mean it's not because of the degree, it's what the degree brings you in America.
Exactly.
And it gives you
resources, access
white
to
collar. It's
healthcare.
basically white collar versus blue collar.
Sure.
And the article goes on to talk about some other things, like a widening gap for whites. And again, this is just whites, because that was what they picked for their study. For whites aged 45 to 54 without college degrees, life tends to be more difficult than those for with degrees. And the number of deaths of despair per 100,000 people, and the chart, I mean, look at how it changed.
Mm-hmm.
In 1992, they were almost the same, just slightly higher for non-college graduates, and it has been uphill, like going up a steep hill. You couldn't even drive up that hill; it'd be too
Right.
steep. From 92 to 2017, it's gone from, and college grads has stayed almost the same, just slightly higher. But for non-college grads, it's gone from, well, it's hard to read this off this chart, but it has gone way like 150, and it was like 15 per 100,000.
Absolutely out of control.
And then on adults saying they're not too happy these days, the spike is on non-college graduates, and college grads actually has gone down. Now, this goes from 1972 to 2016. Interesting why they've got 20 more years of data. But since about, I would say about 1990, there's been a spike. There's not demarcated in what the year is here, but it's spiked, started going up another steep hill that you couldn't drive up based on this chart. Non-college graduates are not too happy these days. Has just spiked to like 17% of the population versus like 8% years before that. And currently marriage. Of course, marriage is going down in this country. There's no doubt about that. But people who are aged 45 to 54 and since about, this data goes from 1980 to 2017, since about probably 1990, college grads, the percent of people who are married that are college grads has stabilized at about 75%, and the percent of non-college grads who are married has just fallen off a cliff, gone from that about 75%, where it was about the same as college grads, and now in 2017, it looks like it's well, this chart goes to 50. Okay, so it exaggerates a bit, but it's down to about 60% probably. And then average number of drinks on days when drinking, it's higher for non-college grads. College grads stayed the same. It's gone up a bit for non-college grads, but it's higher. Attending church weekly, college grads are slightly higher than non-college grads. And share experiencing neck, back, or joint pain that they've said that we experience this, it's higher for our non-college grads than for college grads. So that's the data.
Yeah.
And what's your thought on that, Jimmy? What comments do you have on that? I mean, it's not good.
No, it's not good at all. And this is, I mean, I've seen this firsthand coming up poor. Neither of my parents had college educations. My biological father had PTSD really bad. He was remotely functional in society, but in many ways he was not. My mother was a waitress. My stepfather was a truck driver. We came up poor. I had a brother who drank himself to death at 44 years of age. I've lived through, that whole income inequality thing. My wife is type 1 diabetic. I've felt the strain of, how are you going to buy medicine, or how are you going to pay hospital bills, or things like that. So this, I've lived this, man. I know what this is because I've seen it firsthand, and I've had friends that I love dearly commit suicide or attempt suicide or die from drug overdoses. I've had family members die from alcoholism. And there's a sense of, just no way out of the cage for those people, and especially people that are doing their best and working as hard as they can. I'm not trying to go doom and gloom on it, but there's so many variables to this topic, man. There's so many things that factor in. It's so much harder to get a college education if you come from a single parent household or if you come from a poor home. People aren't starting at the same point in the race, so to speak, and there are too many Americans that have that idea of, well, just try harder. You're not doing so great, you're just not trying hard enough. I mean, there's tons of people that want to go to college that can't afford to go to college, or they're smart enough to go to college, but how do you eat while you're in college? And for me personally, when I got out of high school, I knew I was smart enough to go to college, but it was like, I need to make money. Now I have to work. And it wasn't a matter of, can I get a degree? It was a matter of, well, how do I stay afloat while getting this degree? And I already had a car payment and things like that because, a hand up goes a long way for middle-class people. Many middle-class people, they don't have help getting their first car. They don't have help paying their auto insurance. They don't have help with their health care. They have to do all that stuff themselves. So, there's a certain type of grind that middle-class people are feeling nowadays, and it's just day in and day out and day in and day out. When you're working that hard and you feel like there's no way out of that hole, nobody goes right to suicide. Nobody kills themselves because they don't want to live. They just don't want it to hurt anymore. And it never starts with suicide. It starts with, well, it's Saturday night and my week was crap, so I'm going to drink tonight. And sometimes that's, I'm going to take some pills tonight, or I'm going to try heroin, or whatever it is, I mean, there's a reason why that is so skewed, because it's not just the degree.
Right. That's not a magic potion.
Right.
No.
That's not a magic potion. It has just as much to do with how much of a hand up did those people have before the degree. I mean, it all factors in. There's so many sociological things that factor in. If they got the degree, there's probably a better chance that their parents stayed together. There's probably a better chance that one of their parents had a degree, or both of their parents had a degree. There's probably a better chance somebody was helping them with their homework after school, as opposed to, kids that grew up like me. When I came home from school, my mom was at work and my stepfather was drunk, and nobody even said, hey, how you doing in history? Those conversations never happen. And it's an unfortunate thing, but so much of your life is determined early on. Now, I do believe that people can go back later in life and further their education. It happens all the time, and God bless them for doing it. But there's sort of a general consensus, a general way of thinking in the United States of America that is wrong, that says, well, if you didn't try harder because you didn't try hard enough. There's a lot of people trying as hard as they can.
Yeah.
And when they're trying as hard as they can, and they're a couple months behind on their mortgage, or they can't afford to pay for the medicine that their kids need, or their wife or husband needs, it's a different kind of pressure. They don't feel like there's a way out of that cage. And how are they supposed to further their education if they're already working 40 hours a week and they have kids to take care in there? And there's so many variables.
We could make, like
things.
you even commented, we could make a number of podcasts on this.
Mm-hmm.
But let's talk about this current crisis that we didn't want to really talk about, but we discussed right now the lack of toilet paper is the big crisis. No.
It's insane. It's crazy.
No, the coronavirus crisis is going on now as we're recording this, and I think this video will be up in a couple of weeks, and most likely the coronavirus will still be a thing. We talked about how now there's going to be a lot of working from home, and that right there, not because of design, but inadvertently favors a white-collar worker. Okay. Essentially, not that you have to have a college degree, but most white-collar workers have at least some sort of college, maybe 2-year degree or something.
Yeah.
And you can work from home. Mm-hmm. But if you're a blue-collar worker, if you
gotta go to the plant.
Yeah, if you hang drywall, you can't work from home.
Yeah.
If you're a plumber, you can't work from home.
Or the people in the service industry.
Yeah.
I mean,
if you're in the restaurant.
How many single mothers are feeding their kids with tip money in the service industry? They gotta go to work.
Gotta go to work.
I got calls, this whole thing kind of just blew up like this week, really. And I've had a call every day of, our band canceled, can you play tonight? Our band canceled, can you play tonight? And those people are going to be affected a lot, people that work in the service industry, because they're sitting ducks. If you're a server, you got to go to work because you're counting on the tip money to pay the bills, to feed your family. And you're interacting with how many people on a regular basis, in and out? And then you're going home to your kid. Or nurses. The first thought that I had was, how many nurses are single mothers where are their kids going to go? They're canceling schools right and left. They got to go to work because this is going to put so much pressure on the healthcare system, our already struggling or arguably failing healthcare system. These nurses have to go to work. And now what do they do with their kids? You can't take them to somebody else's house because of the thing. And it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out, because I think the bulk of Americans like to think that we will handle it better than any other nation has. My opinion, and I hope I don't catch a bunch of heat for this, my opinion is, as a society, we could potentially handle this worse than anybody else has handled it, because in America, the concept of individuality is huge. And you saw that right out of the gate. What did everybody do? Oh, well, there's this huge, crazy, contagious, potentially deadly virus. Let's all go to Walmart as soon as we can, buy all the toilet paper, buy all the disinfectant. It's crazy. By the way, there's a thing called Amazon. You can buy anything in the world and they'll bring it to you. But, I hope that the good that comes out of it is that sort of sense of country, that sense of camaraderie, and people get back to helping each other out, because we've lost so much of that.
Well,
man. It used to be that way.
I guess I'm going to go there with my next statement, but I have been as a person who has traveled a lot. I've been to probably 70 countries, and my goal is to go to every country in the world before I leave this earth. And I love traveling internationally. I love going to countries, experiencing culture. And I'm not talking about just going to the American restaurants, and there are people who go to Paris and they're like, man, I need to find a McDonald's.
Yeah, right. Eat some of that Irish food, McDonald's.
And I lived in Japan for 2 years, and part of it was taken out of my paycheck was national health insurance, and it was so incidental. I mean, you hardly even notice it. It was just like $30 a paycheck or something like that, and nobody goes bankrupt for medical issues in Japan, and they do have the longest life expectancy in the world. They have a pretty doggone good health system, and in America it cannot be disputed. We have by far the most expensive healthcare system in the world. It's is not very good by measurable.
No, it's not.
It's not very good. I mean, if you look at the WHO, which is the national or the World Health Organization, and they do studies. And now in some areas like cancer prevention, we're in the top, some of the top in the world, but many other measurements, we really fall down, like infant mortality and life expectancy and many, many other things. Even maternal mortality. We're like a third world country. Our church sent some missionaries to Thailand, and they were a married couple, and they already had 2 kids, and they were expecting a kid, and the kid was it was within a few months, and they were trying to plan their trip. And I remember the dad was asked, are you going to wait until you have the kid here, or are you going to have the kid in Thailand? And there was without a doubt, he said, no, we're having the kid in Thailand.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry to say, and there are people that are going to Thailand specifically to have specific procedures like hip replacements because they're much less expensive,
sure,
and the quality is fine. They do a great job. And it's like you can pay for your vacation, go over there and convalesce, and it's a fraction of the cost in the U.S.
Yeah.
And they do a great job. And we're paying way too much, and the result is low. And here's a statistic, and everyone who says, well, socialized medicine. Unfortunately, McCarthyism gave us a fear of anything that is remotely close to socialized anything, that the government provides anything, and that's a very political hot potato right now.
Sure.
But whatever you want to call it, these other countries do a better job. And one of the things is the number of doctors per 1,000 per capita, or per 1,000 capita, or per 100,000, whatever you want to measure. It's not per capita because there's not a doctor per person, but the number of doctors we have for our size of a population is below the mean for developed countries.
Sure.
So, and a higher majority of our doctors are specialists, because that's where the money is. So general practitioners, we don't have we're really low. And so anyone who says that if you go to another country like Canada and you have to wait to be served, and there's a lot of horror stories about that. But if it's an elective surgery, I guess they make you wait. But we have a lower number of doctors per capita versus most developed countries. And so that tells you a doctor can only see so many people. And so if we have less doctors per person per population, how are we going to get better treatment? And then many of them are specialists, plastic surgeons, that's elective. And then also they're concentrated in larger cities, and in rural areas like rural states, there's a real shortage of medical care.
Where we're at, it's terrible. And my wife's type 1 diabetic, and we're in Madison, Indiana, and it's terrible. It's hard to even get in to see a doctor. So I'm sure those people are doing as well as they can, but it's interesting. It's like right now, her insulin, life-saving insulin, she's type 1 diabetic. We're spending monthly close to what our mortgage payment is to buy insulin. It's insane.
It is insane.
To keep her alive. And it's an absolutely.
Isn't there articles that the actual cost of that is
the person that invented it gave away the patent to save lives. And it has been monetized to the point where corporations are making $1 gazillion off of it. And it's the thing I don't understand, you know. I mean, I know the word socialism scares so many people. As soon as they say it, as soon as they hear that word, they just immediately go on the offensive. But it's interesting to me that I hear so many people argue against even the general idea of making our healthcare industry better. You have people arguing against that, arguing against their own best interest. It's fascinating to me. I know people that owe buku bucks in medical bills that argue against bettering the healthcare industry.
Yeah, for whatever reason, because I guess we had the after the Cold War as put into our psyche in this country that our enemy is communism and socialism. And I like to say, because a lot of conservative Christians, and I'm a Christian, a lot of conservative Christians imply that Jesus was a capitalist and that capitalism is the Christian way. But technically, if you look at the first century church, they were communists. They lived in commons. Everything was in commune. That's a communistic social way of living, is having everything common and no personal property, and that's how the first century church lived.
Yeah.
Look it up.
And what was the one time Jesus lost his cool?
Oh, yeah, when they were at the temple. You know,
exchanging currency in the temple. And what is the temple? The temple is our minds and our bodies. But that's a side note. We're getting a little deep on that. But absolutely, it's a broken system, and it needs fixed.
Our healthcare system. Yeah.
Absolutely. Our healthcare system is broken. It's completely broken.
Costs way too much.
And it needs fixed. And if you're arguing for it to stay the same, unless you work at a pharmaceutical company, you're arguing against your own best interest, and there's no way around it. That's not a jab at anybody or an invitation for an argument. That has nothing to do with political stances. That's just data.
Now, and so conservatives would say that Obamacare failed, and that is an indication we can't go in that direction. Well, the reason that the first attempt that was done under the Clintons was a single-payer system, which is what all these other countries have, a single-payer system that is administered by the government. But that was a non-starter. The Obama administration decided that single-payer was a complete non-starter. So we had to work with the current insurance agents that we had. And it didn't, there were some it didn't work well. There's no doubt about it. Insurance rates went up, but it was something that was tried. And instead of bickering and being bipartisan about it and saying that, this doesn't work, it's socialized medicine, we need to be working together.
Sure.
And Obamacare didn't do very well. It had a lot of faults, had a lot of problems. And, I've heard 10,000 times, you can keep your doctor, Obama said. And ended up you couldn't, So that was a big faux pas there. But does that mean we give up? Because we got a system that ain't working. And there's the only developed country in the world where you can go bankrupt from medical problems.
Sure, and it happens every day to people that are working their butts off. Happens all the time, and it's unacceptable. I mean, how are we even accepting that as a society? Greatest country in the world, and you literally have people blowing their brains out because they can't afford to get health care for their kids or their loved ones. That's real. That's a real thing. That's happening. That's data. How is that allowed to happen?
So I guess my position would be, I'm not saying that what the answer is.
Right.
But let's not keep shooting at each other. Let's look at.
Sure.
One of the if you're in business, one of the premises for making your business better is something called benchmarking. And benchmarking is where you look at other businesses in your segment and you look at measurements like EBITDA or sales growth or profit margin or all these different cost of sales, all these different measurements that are numbers, statistical numbers. And you can get access to that, and you see how are we doing versus the countries in our segment. Benchmarking. I mean, any business person worth his or her salt knows about benchmarking. Why can't we do the same thing as a country? But bring that up and try to bring out what other countries are doing, and there's this resistance that we're exceptional and that we are unique, and that without looking at the numbers, without even comparing,
Sure.
we do some things great. We do some things great.
Because as long as they keep everybody arguing over one word, then they're not going to look at that.
But we do a lot of things really poorly. I mean, we incarcerate the highest percent of our population of any country in the world. There's no country in the world that keeps more of their population in prison.
And I wonder how
What's the point of that?
I wonder how that's going to play out with the virus. I wonder what's going to happen there. I just read yesterday that Iran released like tons of, even violent offenders, tons of people out of their prison systems. And I wonder how that's going to affect everything. I think if this virus blows up like they're obviously afraid it could, it's going to shine a spotlight on some serious issues in our country that we could improve on, mostly on a government level, that we could improve to really be a way better country than we are now. And I'm not saying that we're not amazing. I love the country because it's still that beacon of freedom for people, you know. That's what I love about Nashville so much. You have every walk of life here, and I think that's beautiful. That's the strength of it. But this is going to put a lot of stress on the healthcare industry. People are going to realize where their focuses are. A lot of people are super upset about the college basketball tournament stopping. They're super upset about the NBA stopping.
Yeah.
They're super upset. People are really, really mad because their recreational activities have been suspended momentarily. And I think we lose sight of that. Is, you know, one of the things I was reading yesterday was that there are more events with large groups of people in the United States of America. It has a potential here for this thing to double, triple, quadruple, you know, in numbers, to people be infected in huge numbers.
It's highly infectious. What was your thing that you said? It was 10 times more infectious?
10 times more infectious, oftentimes before even showing symptoms. 10 times more infectious than SARS was, because it can stay in your throat. And there have been people that have been contagious without showing any symptoms whatsoever. And it's affecting everybody differently.
So I think what you said, and I agree with you, we're probably all going to get it.
Maybe.
But it's not. It only affects people who are the older
people, especially male smokers, and obesity, which is going to have a huge impact on America. They saw this thing on ground level in China. Well, there's not many obese people in China. We have no shortage of them here. And people are kind of playing it off like, well, there's nothing to worry about. Well, when most of your country, I don't know the statistics on that, but there's a lot of obese people in America, unfortunately. We're liable to get bushwhacked by this thing, man. This could hit us harder than it hit anybody. Hopefully it doesn't.
I hope not.
Hopefully it goes away tomorrow, man. Hopefully we wake up tomorrow and they say, hey, false alarm, we're playing basketball tonight. I hope and pray that happens, but you know, it's just interesting to see every person has an opinion on it, and they're all over the place, and there's been so much misinformation surrounding the subject to the point of it's a government conspiracy, or they're going to figure out how to take our guns, and it's mind-boggling to me. The mindset of so many Americans now, the focus on fear, it's weird. It's just this mind-boggling thing to me to see it, because people are so focused on fear in one way, that when something that you should probably actually maybe really pay attention to and maybe be a little bit afraid of, they actually refuse to see it, you know? Because we're convinced that they're using this to take all of our stuff while the healthcare industry is and the government's taking all their stuff. I shouldn't have said that.
Well,
pro tip, by the way, here's what little I can do to help people. If you have acid reflux, kombucha, it's the best thing.
that's Japanese, by the way.
It's
Kombucha.
amazing. It's the best thing I've found because I quit taking the over-the-counter medicine, and now whenever I get reflux, I just drink one of these.
Blows my mind. I used to have
And it goes
kombucha
away.
all the time when I used to live in Japan, and you couldn't get that in the U.S. Now
It's great. You can always find it. Kroger always has it. I got this.
So many things have become over from the, sushi. I remember 30 years ago, sushi was not prevalent in the U.S.
Yeah. A lot of people are afraid of it. I have a lot of friends that refuse to eat sushi. They're just like, I ain't doing that. We walked up and ate it off the conveyor belt the other day.
We did! Kaiten sushi!
The little thing was going around like, yeah. It's warm. I don't think I'll die.
With all of the staff being Latina and Latinx. There was a guy and a gal, the Latina, because it was in
Two
Orlando.
people.
Yeah.
We knew good and well that sushi had been there for a while, but it was like,
We were so hungry.
Yeah.
We were so hungry. Anyway, well, should we close it out and maybe come back for another one?
We should definitely touch more on it, man, because I know it's such a touchy subject, and it seems like there's so many really strong feelings that surround it, but it's got to be talked about, man. And it seems like when you try to talk about it with people, it feels like instead of having conversations with people nowadays, that it's almost like opposing football teams. You know what I mean? And I don't really have any political affiliation with anybody.
I'm independent myself.
Right. And I'm not really a Democrat. I'm not really a Republican or whatever. But when something like this comes up, it's almost like this football team versus that football team. And there's no other football teams. But the trouble is, it's like they're two not really good football teams. They just have really rabid fans.
True. Exactly.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, we could do better.
Absolutely.
Oh, well. Okay.
Ever
Let's
onward.
close it out. Jimmy D and the
Close it
Wolf.
out. Peace, everybody.